So this really is a roundtable, starting with folks, and Kira Baker is with us online, I think still. Yes, hi Kira. So it's just an opportunity for us, for those who've worked on the project, to talk a little bit about the actual platform, their thoughts on the ecosystem, where we've landed, and some of what they imagine would be great going forward. We do have a good relationship with DIHL, so the Digital Humanities Innovation Lab here at SFU. They're going to provide a bit of stewardship over the next while and honestly help be in a partnership to raise some funds because the SSHRC grant ends. And we actually want to keep this project going, but we want to adapt it so it meets the needs of others, right? So the other thing we want to encourage people to do is to, in the next little while explore it. We're going to keep the survey up for about a week. And then all the data, which is anonymous, is going to come to us to kind of look at your responses. So there you go. So if you remember how it works, it's the three, right now we're structured as 3 case studies, but it's an OMICA-S platform, and it allows you essentially to curate and create collections essentially of records of different kinds and order them and explore them in ways that are meaningful to you as a researcher and in collaboration with archivists. So I wasn't going to demonstrate it again because I'm assuming people have spent time on it and this isn't what the session is about, but it really is time for a conversation. So out of the folks here, anyone want to kick it off?
I think something that I've been struck by over the last few days is this has been an interdisciplinary conference. People have come from different communities, but it's felt like a community over the last few days, you know. And my concern with all conferences is we all go back to work tomorrow and this community breaks up. And I've just been thinking ways to keep this that kind of momentum going and maintaining these connections. Here we are at the School of Interactive Arts and Technology, and we could really use more and more technical expertise on this platform, right? Are there ways to get people interested in developing these technologies, beyond the small communities that already do? Yeah, and the other thing I've sort of been struck by is it seems like a lot of people who aren't from the archival community have been turned on by archives over the last few days. Go visit your archives and continue to build those relationships. So we're not scary people. We're nice people. We welcome you in. I think archives, like arts councils and other, small communities, we're small, and we need those relationships and we need those partnerships to do new things. Part of the reason why archives don't change is because archives aren't well funded, they're small, and they're just struggling to get by to do their day-to-day. So if we're going to start thinking about new ways of doing things and using new technologies and building new partnerships, we really need help to do that.
And Paul, you have some ideas though about thinking about OMICA-S as a kind of framework, coming out of this project for a single archive. Do you want to share a couple of thoughts on that? Because I think it might be interesting to some of the folks who are listening.
Well, I know we've been talking about trying to launch our own instance for the archive. So we have Richard presented on our digital access system, which is called ATOM, Access to Memory. It's really a catalog that delivers up digital objects, but in not a particularly dynamic way. So we've talked about launching OMICA as a way of pushing out some of our content in a more interesting way. So that's, I think, a commitment we're going to make going forward. I think I mentioned in my talk on the second day that what we're also trying to do with the platform is to make it more interactive. I still think of it as a curatorial platform that's really pushing content out, and it's not allowing the people viewing the content in very dynamic ways to kind of provide feedback. And there are big issues around resourcing Even something, open source is still, there's always a cost. If anyone's worked with open source technology, it's not free. There's cost to maintenance, there's cost to modification. Yeah, so I don't, it's,
That's great, thanks.
yeah.
I mean, one of the folks that was listening into a session or another, I can't quite remember which, talked about the resources at the Digital Alliance. And that's something I'm going to really check out, because the Alliance is where we live right now. Like we are on that platform. It's the supercomputing network across Canada that's funded to support research in different kinds of research, and also research partnered with industry. And its role really is to support kind of rich, data rich, and computationally rich platforms and environments. So we may have an opportunity, because we are hosted there. They don't provide technical back engine support in any way. I mean, that's really come from DHIL in a great way. And of course, the front end stuff's been Kahani and Joey. But I'm interested in exploring that, and if we do put a coalition together and really looking at that kind of environment and seeing what we can do, in fact, to influence them and see what other work they may be doing in the archive sector and library sector, because I think I actually really don't know. And I do know that they're really hungry for digital humanities projects. They want to have much better representation of the social sciences and humanities and the arts. The arts universities are in a big conversation with the Alliance right now about better engagement and representation and use. So yeah, so that may be a source. Who'd like to speak next about? Okay.
So I think a big thing I've learned through this symposium is really reinforced my idea that the community needs to come into the archives, that there is like a big gap between the archives and users and record subjects that we need to address. And community engagement has been a very big interest of mine for a number of years. And for years, I've been wanting to get access to a platform that allows the community in to comment and add their own, what we're doing, like add metadata, add commentary. So for instance, I'll go on Facebook and I'll see all these groups that are set up for various communities, and people will post photos, and then everybody comments on them and they add in all the information like, oh, that was here, that was this event, and all this valuable information. And it's like, how do we capture that? And I think that this could be a really great tool for doing that. And I know at the archives, Richard and I have talked about potentially using this for some of our subject-based collections, and possibly also in my own research. I'd like to do something with this as well. So, okay. Yeah, definitely. So I am working on co-authoring a book on Vancouver punk rock history. And so we're currently doing a lot of oral history interviews, but we're also taking advantage of the really rich Vancouver punk rock collection that's at SFU Special Collections, and also material that still remains in the community. And we're digitizing a lot of that for this project. So I could see this being a perfect ecosystem for putting up those items and then allowing the community to comment on them. And this is actually one of the instances in which I've seen in social media where these groups exist and everybody's, they're contributing content, and then they're giving really rich historical context to the material. And I don't want to see that lost. I'd like to see a system where it could be preserved and shared.
Sure. I can at least say something a bit more personal in that this was my first time building a platform and even experiencing the archives at all. So this was just a huge learning experience for myself, and I really got to see the amount of work that goes into creating all these materials, and organizing them is just so much work, and And I kind of just tried to make something that could respond to that, but had enough of a foundation because you really need that, as I've come to learn with these kinds of databases. And it's just really exciting to hear that people are responding to it. And as for like where this could go next, I think like I've been really thinking very much specifically about Omeka's framework, and just the amount of customization that it is providing. And I think it would have been like really interesting to like take advantage of the microsites kind of framework of Omeka and have like, say each of these case studies were their own site, and like this ecosystem can really like flourish. So I'm just really excited to see more people use it, get more user feedback. Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah, I did mean to mention that as well, because that was a really new thing that we kind of were just able to get up, like the week before we got to the symposium. So they're very much like a work in progress that is showing what is possible. And so those relationship diagrams, I mean, Omeka, I feel like I can't take much credit for them because their system is really well suited, for parsing through like your entire pool of materials and then pulling on these different relationship connections. So I just think that would be like a really interesting thing to go deeper in and then like choose specific metadata properties to like correlate to a type of relationship. And like the more dynamic you get in there, the more you can like filter down and then kind of like get into like specific relationships and then the macro relationships, or pick on 3 of them. So there's just a lot of interesting things you can do with that.
Yeah, and Andrea somehow escaped being up at the front. We didn't see you at the time. Is there a chair? Or I can stand if you'd like to sit in this chair. Because one of the things that didn't happen at the level that we'd like it to, but I think we're gonna, Andrew and I are gonna continue to look at this because we want to keep collaborating in our work going forward as researchers, is to look at the connections between her case study, which is 3, and case study 1, because there's this whole dialogue around people who worked in any kind of restaurant, any kind of food-based. There's a, did you want to say, okay, perfect, then okay, then I'll sit. Not that I kind of need to stand too. We all need to stand. But any kind of sort of food-based industry, and to kind of look at those histories and what kind of flow there might have been back and forth between them, and also even in who was taking photographs and whether some of that representation was done by some of the same photographers would be really interesting. So, so that's one of the things that I think we want to possibly do as a next stage, is just more of the relational work, within the items that we were able to put up there. So, Karen, do you want to?
I have so many things.
Well, go.
No, I was just going to say that I sort of came to the platform different than most people because I was both someone entering the data into the platform for Vivo and also functioning as a researcher. So those things became very muddled. You know what I mean? But it was also an interesting experience to do that. I feel like because of that, I see the 2 sides of that. I saw right now in its current iteration, the difficulty for a small organization like Vivo to be able to put in the amount of labor required with that. But that's just, it's a prototype, and that's not where we intend to remain. I mean, the goal is to reduce the workload the archives would have to, undertake. As a researcher, I found it really fun. Like I liked it as we started building it out, and started working with it. And yeah, I'd want to, we were sort of creating both a platform that other people could look like. So it was very curatorial, as Paul said. So that was different than what you would do as a private researcher coming into the space. You would treat the space slightly differently, and I think that would be valuable, especially as Sarah and I were working across such long distance. Like, it was great to be able to just put up material, and if it had been organized in a way that was easier for us to look at as researchers as opposed to outside people coming to look at a presentation of a case study, I think it would have been really great. So I appreciated the format. I liked being able to see the document or image directly alongside the metadata as opposed to functioning in something like Teams where you're like moving through links all the time. I thought that was really great. So there were a whole bunch of things I really appreciated about where it started going in the last days of this project that I think can be very useful.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we said, just to repeat ourselves, but on Friday, we were thrilled that the thematic guides are interactive. And I mean, they are big, Excel spreadsheets, which my students think I have an addiction to. That
They're so
said,
nice.
they're really rich, and you can be on the site and you could download the thematic guide and you can be looking at it, but you can also have it open on the platform and you can click and go to the object, so you can see all that. Like the metadata that we put into those guides have so much description and information about the kind of history of that object, that's something I think is unique possibly to this platform that I think we'd like to look at, more as we go forward. So, Andrew, do you have comments? And then Richard?
There was a question to comment on, or just?
No,
maybe-
no.
Oh,
Words of wisdom about the platform.
words
and
of
where-
wisdom. I just have to
and where-
say,
where it needs to go next.
okay.
Yeah.
Based on our case study 3, well, Sara already stated that, I think we need to do some deeper linkages between case study 3 and case study 1. But the really exciting thing for me is that much of the material I think that we need to find is not actually available in those official spaces. And the ways in which we're building this platform allows us to bring in the small A archives into that space, which I think is really innovative compared to other ways of dealing with the archive and making an interruption there. Our project is ongoing in that much of what we're trying to find will come from family collections and from these lesser official spaces. What's really, really exciting for me is to make a connection between a more intersectional type of analysis within the space of the platform. Because as you were presenting case study 1 at Vivo, it occurred to me that there's some real linkages between race and class and gender. And that I feel needs to be more visible in the content that we have and the kinds of interrelationships we make. But I've been really, really happy and excited. It's been a lot of work. And so the other part of it is just really as a group thinking about labor and maybe even thinking it through as we present this material to really make visible the kinds of invisible labor that's going on behind the scene to create something as dynamic as we're doing.
Yeah, that's a great comment and really appropriate given the content of case study 1 and 3. It's kind of ironic if we don't, right? Richard?
Sure. Well, I guess maybe just sort of echoing a lot of things are said here, but one thing that just struck me is like we met last year around this time. And when I think back to what we had then, it was very like we didn't have a platform at all. So just how much work got done in 1 year was kind of amazing. I guess the idea I would really like to see it go in some ways, like getting to that idea of getting stuff into it. Like in a sense, it's all kind of pre-selected behind the scenes, what content is there. And what would be really nice, it would be kind of, I think, sort of radical and revolutionary if you get a interface where, an institution like ours was going to contribute, we could just have a kind of setting that we could say, turn our descriptions on, and then you go at it how you want, and you pull in what you want, right? But that's incredibly hard to do.
It can be done, though.
It can be done,
It
yeah.
actually
yeah.
can be done.
Yeah.
I mean, there is we finally got the kind of level of computational team we needed together. I mean, Kahani's been a stalwart, consistent all the way through, but it really was the last 8 months, right? Not
Yeah.
even that, right? Oh, yeah, no,
Yeah.
heroic, right?
Yep.
Thank you.
And I mean, I think one
Yeah.
of the limitations is on our side, like we couldn't do that right now with our own systems,
But,
right?
but I mean, Kahani
yeah.
carried it, and
Yeah.
then they came in and was able, and yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Maybe just underscoring that, like in our archives, we don't have the technical expertise to do this, so we did have to rely on Kahani, and we did have to rely on the Digital Humanities Lab, and we had some people come and go over the 2 years, so there were fits and starts. But again, just re-emphasizing, like, this takes a lot of time and a lot of resources, so there's a lot of potential there, but that's sort of one of the big challenges moving forward, I think.
Which is why we probably need a larger coalition going forward to really do this. And we'll come back to that. And I just wonder, Kira, I know you're online, and and I know also that you've been recovering from not being 100% well. But I'm wondering if you wanted to jump in and say anything as one of the amazing resources that we've had as part of this process.
Hi, hi Sarah. Hi everyone. Yeah, I think it's been a bit of a disconnect over the past few days, as I haven't been able to tune into everything. But I mean, there's the last few days it's been talking about how we interact with digital objects in online spaces, and that sort of approach to how folks sort of discover and interact with records and digital objects material. But I think too, just to sort of bring it back to the importance of the sort of the human to human connections as well, whether that's through, I mean, the initial like records creation, but also sort of how users are maybe using it with others, and building off of it. And so just sort of reiterating what Paul said earlier about, come to archives, and speak with archivists, and sort of also interact with the material, and just also build connections through the resources as archive staff as well. I would also say.
Yeah, that's really great. And Kira, do you have any comment on your experience? And you didn't work directly uploading onto the platform, but you certainly were extremely present for both Andrea and for Karen and for me in our work. So I don't know if you'd like to talk a little bit about that and what it was like as an archivist, sort of working with researchers who are trying to find, I mean, in the usual ways, trying to find, material within the fonds, right? But then the whole question of how you digitize, how you think about copyright, the sort of just-in-time support that you gave to us, which was fabulous. I don't know if you'd like to comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, that's kind of the bread and butter of what archivists sort of do day to day. But I mean, it was, and that's also sort of a lot of the pleasure that archivists get, I will say, is as having users come in and find material or come across something that they were looking for, or the unexpected as well. And so, and I think the project also sort of reflects, whether it was you and Karen coming in and already being familiar with, well, CVA and our setup, or you already had some flow in mind that you were sort of interested in, versus when Myra coming in, she'd never been there before, and where to start with our holdings. So it's sort of that, it sort of shows the classic, or maybe classic isn't the right word, but it sort of shows the breadth of the kinds of users that might be coming in and how they sort of first approach archives.
And I would just build on what you're saying, which is in whatever we do with this platform, the role of the archivist in and we've talked about this a lot, in being present and giving advice and being able to comment on appropriate choices, being able to go back and look at metadata changes that are requested, look at comments that people are making, and really continue to play that role in a digital context. That is a human role. It's not the role of, in my mind, an AI agent. It's the role of a human, archivist who still would be, engaged with a digital platform of this nature, even as parts of it, like being able to upload items or sub-items within a font. That would potentially be automated, but the permissions to put in place around copyright, around what is accessible and what isn't, is still going to be something that requires our archivist discretion, I think, within that context. So I don't know if there's any other comments from us, and we will go out to you out there to see if you've got any comments. Yes, Sydney.
Okay, well, the first one is actually for you. It's a clarifying question. At the end of the last session, you were talking about the funding and stats, and you mentioned the name of a gallery or an organization in Toronto that's currently using data and training people. And this person missed the name. What's the name?
It's not Toronto. It's an Ontario-based organization with a national project. It's Galerie, Ontario Galleries. And they have a funding from Heritage and Canada Council to train the gallery and museum sector in the use of data. And our team that's doing the work on building this database of cultural databases, we're also providing them with advice on a kind of seek and we will find for you basis when galleries and museums need particular data sets or a kind of data. So we're acting as their data sleuths. Another question?
Okay, so Marilyn asks, and this is either for Paul or for Richard. The SFU Archives uses Atom, so she's curious, will the SFU Archives provide a crosswalk for online audiences to Crossing Fonds? She's hoping that the Crossing Fonds website is somehow going to be visually shown to the public from the SFU Archives.
Richard?
I mean, ideally, I think we could, getting those crosswalks would not be too hard to pull out the way we mapped our fields for the CSV kind of imports. But I think also in terms of getting links to, like, that is a way I think where we could improve our own systems, right? Where to be able to link out where people have used our material, and ideally where people could declare those links themselves, so we should be able to link there. And I could think of ways that we can kind of do hacks around it right now and could get that there. But yeah, I think that's stuff that we would want to develop more ourselves.
Yeah, I think is the website currently hosted on your Compute Canada space? Is that? Yeah. So, and the platform is populated by records from multiple repositories. So, it's something we could explore for sure, but it is resource heavy to maintain this. And I don't know that we have the resources currently. So, I think that's an open question as to, what do we do with these platforms? And whose responsibility is it to maintain them? As Richard was saying, just to maybe contradict something that Sara said, I mean, one way this could work is if we had that technology to kind of expose our holdings, we could not be involved almost at all. We can say, we have this stuff. You're the subject matter experts. You're the researchers. You take what you want, use it the way you want. We don't need to mediate, right? And we don't want to be steering your research. We want to, you do your inquiry free from our interference.
Nice to know what you've done.
But nice to know what you've done. I mean, one of the things we are always trying to do is demonstrate value, right? So if you're using our archives and you're, there's new knowledge creation as a result of that, it helps us in an institutional context to say we have value, and we're supporting the research mission of the university.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said is really interesting, Paul. And as those words had come out of my mouth, I thought, well, maybe they're not the right words, and maybe your role is just to make sure that the only things made accessible are copyright cleared Do you know what I mean? That whatever the ground rules are of access, that would be set, and then people can just suck, items in or item sets in.
And we've been moving in recent years. Richard is more expert on this than I am, but copyright in an archival context is really, really tricky because you get a fond, and a fond is made up of often thousands of records with multiple authors. So even when a donor donates something to an archives and they sign over their copyright, they sign over the copyright in the material that they own copyright, but there's lots of copyright owners within a single fond. And it's next to impossible to track down copyright owners when you think of a totality of a fond. So we've moved towards Creative Commons licensing. And we also tell researchers, we will always give you a copy for your personal use and study. But if you want to make it, if you want to publish it online or use it in some other way, the onus is on you to track down the copyright owner because we don't have the resources to do it. So if we have that information, we'll share it. And we encourage donors to give us as much information as they have to facilitate that use. But we could have someone just doing that on staff and nothing else.
Well, that's even better in terms of being able to, build the tools to be able to pull content in, right? I mean, it does need, I think one of the challenges is that this is an environment that has a lot of compute power. And even so, there's limits to the amount of video that can be on, et cetera. So, one of the things that we I think, remain very interested in is how one could build this out as a, continue for it to be a research environment where you can access rich media in a condensed way, which is sort of what we did with it. But yeah, back to you.
Nobody in the room?
Any questions in the room? Comments? Strategies? Interest in investing $1 million and
At least $1 million.
So this question's also from Marilyn. It's for Melanie. Melanie, you mentioned the punk rock LP collection and ephemera at SFU Special Collections. Marilyn's question is, would you be interested in collaborating using Omeka S with the Polygon Gallery, which hosted a photo representation of punk rock collaborators from the late 70s and 80s? The photo-based work represented at the Poly in 2023-2024 of punk rockers as they are seen now.
Definitely interested in collaborating. And it is something we're looking into. So, yeah, that's an excellent point.
okay, any other comments either in the room or online or from our panelists? Okay, that's fabulous. So thanks, everybody. We're all meeting together in the next 2 days to strategize what's happening next. And we have, I think, some great presence at DHL for that as well. But thank you, all you fabulous collaborators, for all the great work that you've done. And I'm going to just say a few words and close things out. But you don't have to sit at the front anymore. You guys will go back. Okay, here are my closing remarks. Closing remarks. So I want to thank the steering committee for the symposium, Dr. Andrea Fatona, Melanie Hardbattle, Kara Knights, and Sheila Carpendale, and of course, Sydney Lines, who has been just absolutely heroic. I also want to thank our the fabulous 3R RAs. So Mia, Claire, and Jordan, who've taken us through registration, drink tickets, everything. And the steering committee of the larger project is Paul Ibar and Karen Knights. There were goals for the 3 days of the symposium that included the workshops and the symposium. We really wanted to try and share this and pitch this and get you interested in it and get you to test it. So thank you to all of you who did that. And we also really wanted to deeply dive into the culture of care in terms of what that means in the archival sector and look at issues of inclusion and representation for equity seeking and deserving communities and groups, and really understand how archival practice is changing. We had hoped to gather knowledge from both inside the archival world and library world and the Artist One Center world and artists and cultural producers, as well as the technology world. And I think we did have a great interdisciplinary forum. So thank you for all of you who really, contributed that knowledge and capacity. And we wanted to sort of blend in the whole complex of media archives, both what their demands are and in terms of how to support them, but also the incredible contribution that they make, but the challenge as well. And I think, we heard some great presentations today from that, and that's been woven throughout. So I don't have a lot to say around closing things out. I think people have stayed with us. I'm amazed at how many people are still online. And we were very worried about doing a hybrid event. And I think it actually hopefully worked for most people. So, with a little bit of occasional Zoom challenge. So thank you all for being with us over the last 4 days, and we will keep the conversation going.